Good morning. This is November 21st at 10 a.m. I'm sorry, at 9 a.m. And this is the meeting of the Audit Committee of Covered California to order and take roll call. Kate Kendall.
Here.
And Senator Hernandez, and I'm here. We have a quorum. We have no absent members. Kate, I wonder if you have any conflict of interest with anything that pertains to the agenda today?
I do not. Thank you very much.
Great, and neither do I. So there are no conflicts. We will welcome participation for those in person or anybody who'd like to call into the webinar wherever they might be in the state. So with that, I'd like to maybe, Kate, entertain a motion to approve our minutes from our August 18th meeting.
So moved, although I was not at that meeting.
Ah, okay. So
Not sure
how
I
about
can do
you
that.
abstain and all approve them as a member?
Very good.
I think we can do that. Okay, so we'll consider the minutes approved. Should have taken public comment. Anybody in the public like to comment on the meeting minutes from August 18th? Okay,
No one on the phones.
great.
Sandra, Kathy Keeshan has come to the podium, I think, to speak to the procedure around the minutes.
Yeah, I just think it's good
Thank
for
you, Kathy.
the board to know in general, under Robert's Rules of Order, you may vote on at a meeting for which you were not present. The idea is that we're just approving that the minutes are an accurate reflection of what occurred at the prior meeting. So, Kate, unless you had evidence or information that led you to believe that they were inaccurate, you can go ahead and vote.
Very good. Thank you, Kathy. Well, then I'll make the motion or second the motion.
You'll second the motion. All right, we'll take a vote. Assuming we've got nobody from the public that'd like to comment. Okay, if not, Kate Kendall.
Aye.
Senator Hernandez is an aye. Okay, minutes are approved. Thank you, Kate. Now what I'd like to do is turn it over to Jenny, who is our Deputy Director of Program Integrity and our Chief Audit Executive. Jenny, over to you.
Good morning to our Audit Committee, Dr. Hernandez and Ms. Kate Kendall. Welcome. Good morning to our Executive Director, Jessica Altman, and to all the Chief Deputy Directors and Directors who are on the call. First of all, thank you. Excited that we are having our November Public Audit Committee meeting. And for this part of the agenda, I would like to present and ask for action on the revised internal audit charter. And just for administrative purposes, the changes we have here are what was discussed at the last meeting in August, and we had just minor conforming changes. The first one being the audit committee composition, as well as the term. And the second one was based on your question at the last meeting, Dr. Hernandez, about clarifying how we conduct audits based on risk, based on resources, and based on audit scope on the qualified health plans. And if there are any questions, so we would like to recommend approval of the revised internal charter.
Great. That looks good to me. Thank you, Jenny, for making those changes that we discussed. Kate, do you have any questions or comments on the chart? Sorry?
I do not. Sorry.
I do not. Okay. Let's see. Is there any public comment on the proposed changes to the charter?
There are no comments.
Great. Kate, I'd entertain a motion to approve them.
So moved.
And I'll second them, and we'll vote on them. Kate?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye. Okay, Jenny, thank you. Back to you.
And thank you. For the next part of the agenda, I'll be turning over to our presentation. For the roadmap, we are going to cover the results, review the results of the 2021 programmatic audit. We will also be reviewing the results of the fiscal year 2021 financial statement audit, as well as our external audit of the California Department of Social Services Appeals Invoices Audit. We will be presenting the Office of Audit Services quarterly report, wrap up, and in response to your question from the last meeting, Dr. Hernandez, we are presenting the team organization. Just wanted to make a suggestion for purposes of our meeting in terms of what we have in the agenda. We would like to focus our attention today on the 2021 programmatic audit results. This is a federally mandated, CMS mandated annual audit report conducted by our external auditors. And if time permits, with your permission, then we could probably table the financial statement audit or discuss it with the time that we have as well as the other audit. And if that's okay, because I think we have a lot of, we have a robust conversation here and wanted to highlight what the auditors have found are the notable accomplishments of Covered California, as well as areas that we could work on. And I also wanted to present the business perspective of our different program areas that are impacted with audit findings, and we've invited program leadership to provide background perspective as well as what is being done on the corrective action so we can remediate the problem immediately.
Sounds good, Jenny. Let's plan to do that. Let's see how far we can get in an hour, but let's not rush the programmatic audit. How about that?
Great, thank you so much. Moving
Okay.
on to the
Kate,
next.
you okay with that, I assume?
I am in full agreement with that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, Jenny, let's dive in.
And for people who get excited about audits, let the show begin. So we are going to present our 2021 programmatic audit results. Just for the background, this is an annual mandated CMS audit which focuses on operational, programmatic, with focus on enrollment, eligibility determination, as well as other specific areas that we at Covered California from the audit shop have wanted to add in for focus. This is mandated in terms of ensuring that in terms of objectives, we evaluate the program efficiencies and the results of the program. We also have to make sure that the external auditors review compliance with federal regulations, as I mentioned, on the general functions of the program, eligibility determinations, enrollment functions, and certification of qualified health plans. As they do the audit, and we have an external audit, Schoberg Evashank Consulting, who have been our auditors, they also are providing us with just their perspective to ensure that we're compliant with requirements.
Jenny, can you just remind us, this independent audit firm is one that we've used in the past, but we did a procurement, did we not, for them?
Yes, we did. So they basically we had gone through competitive bid, but in addition, I think as we work through the program, they have also been with us, and as we go for another bid, I think that's also an opportunity. But what we do have here is continuity and expertise with the program, and they could actually provide the additional background needed.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
I mentioned earlier that in addition to the regular compliance and program evaluation features, for this year, there were additional areas of focus. Specifically, we were looking at cloud migration. We were also looking at ombuds, plan management, and we also looked at the Navigator program. I just wanted to make sure that while we have, as you mentioned, contracted with our external auditors, in the report itself, the auditors have acknowledged the accomplishments of Covered California. And I think it's important for us to note that we had requested a review of implementation of the American Rescue Plan, and they found no audit findings. We also had gone through cloud migration of the CalHERE system, and that was actually noted as no audit findings. But we also have gone through and for auditors, for our external auditors to recognize the breadth of work as well as to actually highlight in the report the work that we continue to do. That also goes to show the continuous improvement that we are doing as an organization. So at this point, I just wanted to start off with a discussion of the key audit findings. The way the format would go is, I had mentioned earlier, I will be presenting the specific audit finding, and then we'll be discussing what the finding is, implications, and then proceed with providing, as we show on the third column, what is the status of corrective action. I think our goal when we receive the report is we recognize what the finding, understand what the risk, but what we also have ready today is we are going to present program leadership to provide the background of the finding, also provide what is being done currently to fix the finding, because specifically for this report, it was issued in August of 2022. And we have submitted to CMS, and we have also submitted our corrective action plan. So our goal is to ensure that there is corrective action monitoring as well as assurance of the work. So the way I'd like to provide the findings is I'll start off with the finding, and I will call on program leadership on specific areas, especially in, I think, in this area that is noted as a repeat finding. It also is stated in the report that we need immediate action. So for the first audit finding, this the discussion on the audit finding is regarding eligibility verifications that did not always occur, and therefore they highlight the risk that we could have unqualified individuals enrolled, and they also cited that many were receiving federal and or state subsidies. I think the one thing that the auditors were highlighting is they provided the scope of what the finding would have for the December 31st, 2021 plan year. And however, they also provided perspective on what the sampled cases were, for what new enrollments and re-enrollments were, and what attributes were missing. They also had cited that Covered California does not always verify the consumer's general and eligibility. And Covered California did not have the required notices. With each finding, the auditors have provided specific, while we have finding one, the auditors have provided several recommendations, which are item 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. What we present on the last column is just to highlight what has been done as corrective action and the work that is being done and what assurance is going to be done. I think in this specific finding, which the auditor stated needs immediate action, we also wanted to highlight the work that is being done behind the scenes to fix the problem, but I also wanted to highlight what are the areas of risk. So the first area of risk is the risk of non-compliance with federal regulations. The other item that is cited is the repeat finding, but we also want to note, as Katie would be speaking about later, like what the flexibilities that were given with a public health emergency. So we want to make sure that we provide the background and also assure you that the audit team is working with programs, and we basically have the internal auditors and external auditors working on the specific corrective action assurance.
So Jenny, the last time we looked at this, there was not an assignment of how much money we might be talking about. The 1.7 billion in tax credits, is that a number that is a hypothetical number, or is that a number that's real based on what the audit actually looked at?
So, the first item that you mentioned, Dr. Hernandez, is you are correct. This is the first time that the audit report actually assigns an amount and the dollars. And
And Potential amount.
Potential amount. So you're correct. And when auditors write a report, they actually extrapolate it from the sampled cases. So I think at this point, I wanted to bring in and invite Katie, who could provide the business perspective, the background, and also just the evolution of this finding and what our fixes are.
Good morning, Katie.
Thanks, Ginny.
I like
Good
the
morning. Thank you very much. I'm happy to pick up here, and just for the record, Katie Ravel, Director of Policy Eligibility and Research. So as we look at this finding, and I'll start where you started, Dr. Hernandez, which is the number that we see, that 1.7 billion. I would say that I consider that a hypothetical number, and let me give a little background here. As we look at our inconsistency, the vast majority of our inconsistencies are individuals with an inconsistency in income. That means they projected an income for the upcoming year. We checked it against prior data sources, their prior year's tax return, and we found a discrepancy, particularly a discrepancy where the consumer attests to making less than the prior data shows us. Those are most of our inconsistencies. As we ended 2022, it was about 300,000 individuals, so about 15% of our membership. Those individuals, when they file their taxes, will true up. If they actually make less than they projected, they're going to get some money back from the IRS. If they made more, they're going to give some money back to the IRS. So as we've looked at data that comes out of the IRS, we find that about half of people get some money back, about half of people return some money. I think if my team had had the assignment to take that 300,000 and say, how might the money shift back to the government at tax time, we would have used a different methodology. What we think the auditors did here is basically take all the 300,000 approximately people, total up all of their APTC, and say that entire amount is at risk. That's not the way the money is going to flow, the way we understand the data and have looked at it over the years. So that's a
Katie, would you turn your camera off? You are, as you say, turned into a robot. And we can't hear you either at the moment.
very
Sandra, you're on mute. We will.
Okay. Katie, I suggest you go off video
Yeah.
and just stay on audio, see if we can hear you that way.
If everybody repay, which is not, if people don't really in place. I'll be.
Katie, do we have you?
It looks like Katie dropped to rejoin.
She's going to come back in, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure she will.
Okay, is it better now?
Yes.
So much.
Okay.
Katie.
Not knowing where I turned into
Katie,
a
we
robot.
essentially lost you early in that explanation.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Where the estimate that the assumption you have for the methodology is that for these consumers, roughly half of them would end up owing the IRS money, the other half would benefit from it. So you think the number that is estimated here is sort of unilaterally high, if you will. Is that fair?
That is fair. That's exactly what I was saying, and I think I'm happy to take any follow-up questions on that.
So it seems like there's not, I mean, what is the remedy there, really, Katie, in terms of how we think about verification of eligibility financially?
Yeah.
And Katie, can I, this is Kate, can I ask a
Yes.
follow-up to that exact question? Not only what is the remedy, but what is the remedy that the auditors accept?
Exactly.
A better question.
So let me give a little bit of background on what we did in 2021, and I'm going to particularly highlight income, and then I'll move us into 2022 so that we can talk about those remedies. I will say the remainder, most of the events that you'll see, things that we need to verify, Do you have proper citizenship and immigration status? Are you incarcerated? Are you deceased? Those are the events that would truly disqualify you from marketplace coverage. We find that fewer than 5% of our enrollees fall into those events that are truly disqualifying. For those events, the remedy is give the consumer 95 days to clear that up. And if they don't clear it up, then terminate their coverage. With those rules, we're able to be fully compliant, and we moved into that in 2022. So
Katie, let me just make sure I understand
Yep.
that. So there are 3 conditions that would make you ineligible besides income, right?
there are three conditions that make you ineligible: lack of citizenship or immigration status, incarceration, or being deceased. Those make you truly ineligible. Income and having other coverage just makes us change your financial subsidies. You're still allowed to buy through the marketplace, but we might change the amount of tax credit you're receiving, or we might turn it off entirely. So I don't consider those truly disqualifying. You're still more than welcome to shop in the marketplace.
And the 5% that are truly ineligible, we give them 90 days to remedy it. What does that mean, remedy it in those circumstances?
That means you provide either documentation or attestation that you are a citizen, you are lawfully present, you're not incarcerated, or you're alive. And consumers do that through a variety of acceptable documents, or if documents aren't available, they can attest to those. So that's the process. And then the federal government gives you that 95 days. If at the end you don't clear up that condition, then we terminate your coverage. Our system is fully able to do that. And as we moved into 2022, as we lifted some of the flexibilities that we put in place due to the public health emergency, we turned those on. And when Ginny moves to the slide on finding particularly 1.1, we're in full compliance with that particular finding on citizenship and immigration status. So we have taken the action that we need to there, and that's one that will continue into 2023 and beyond. As we then look at income, and that's the big driver of the numbers and the dollars, at the end of 2021, we did a few things. One, we took federal flexibility. So the federal government said, you know what, as we've looked at our implementation of the federally facilitated marketplace over the years, we actually think it's appropriate to give consumers sort of a wider range of income variation and allow them to be fully eligible. So the federal government did that and offered that opportunity to the states. We took that in California back in fall of 2021. We changed our regulations to provide that additional flexibility to consumers. And the federal government also gave us an extra eligibility income data source to use, which we also implemented. So that moved us into 2022, where we were able to clear a lot of individuals using that new flexibility and that new data source. So as we look to 2023, I think, and I'll mention one additional thing. In prior findings, we've had findings around some of the additional things that we need to verify, including minimum essential coverage. Our team in 2022 found, really working with our IT partners, found an ingenious sort of workaround to this system limitation. So as we move into 2023, we'll be able to take action on the full range of eligibility and consistencies over which we need to manage and which have been cited in the audit. So I'm feeling quite positive moving into 2023 that we have the system features in place and the tools that we need to take the actions that are required of us. I'll pause there for any questions or follow-up.
I don't have any other follow-up. That answered both the compliance question, and I also had a timing question, and you answered that as well. So thank you for the prescience and understanding where I was going to go next.
Yeah, thank you. Katie, just on the timeline for corrective action, we're delaying this to Q1 2023, is that right?
Yes, at this point, as we have a shift in benefit years, we're not asking consumer at the very end of plan year 2022, we're not asking consumers to provide documentation for plan year 2022. We're looking forward to 2023 so that we don't have consumers providing duplicative documents for different years. So when we start in 2023, that will be the time that the 95-day clock, if you will, expires for the people who are enrolled for 2023. So our discontinuance activities, if you have to be discontinued from the program or have your APTC adjusted, that will all resume in February of 2023, again, as that 95-day clock expires for our enrollees who start the 2023 year with us.
Okay. And Jenny, when would the audit come back and look at our compliance for the first quarter of 2023?
So
What's the time frame?
So, Dr. Hernandez, because this is an annual audit, we actually have the auditors here. And around February of 2023 is when they start looking at the corrective action work done on prior audit findings. And that's done in February of 2023 because then they're getting ready to get their report issued for this current 2022 plan year to be submitted to CMS before June of 2023. So it's a,
Okay, got it.
so I think it's, so the timing would be quarter one. The other thing that we submit to the auditors and when they inquire about the status is the audit shop also gets involved and we also share with the auditors as the auditors ask from the programs. But we are also ensuring internally that we are reviewing the timeline and the actions taken. So we're actually
Great.
doing, in one of the slides, we talk about the coordination of the processes.
Got it. And maybe for Katie, I assume that you have the resources you need to implement this new target date. This is not about a constraint of resources, right?
No, it's really not. It in 2021, it was certainly about us providing the public health emergency.
Got it.
So no resources here.
Okay. Okay, Jenny, back to you. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think to follow up on what Katie had mentioned and to highlight the questions, the responses to your question, if I go to the next slide, this is where we talk about the specific recommendation by the auditors. And I think Ms. Kate Kendall, you also asked, what is done? How can we fix the problem? So in this specific recommendation 1.1 for finding one, they talk about ensuring that we implement for lawful presence and citizenship, the required fix. And what we have here, as Katie had mentioned, is this was implemented in July of 2022 when there was the ROP discontinued for lawful presence and citizenship. So that actually, and then we also explain what the policy is, how we can help our consumers during open enrollment. Moving on to your question about Q1 2023, this is where I just wanted to highlight what is bolded in the middle of the section. Katie mentioned about the repeat finding when there was an earlier finding on minimum essential coverage. And this basically is the discussion that after they've implemented the ROP for incarceration, death, lawful presence and citizenship, they are looking at the different populations for minimum essential coverage, for ensuring that we also look at the American Indian, American Native, the AIAN population, as well as those populations with unverified social security numbers. And when we review the corrective action plan submitted by programs, we're also looking to see that the timeline is doable. And this actually explains the work that has been done thus far. And moving on to the next slide, this is like the third recommendation for
Quickly on the last slide, the issue of minimum essential coverage and the American Indian Alaska Native piece, how are those related?
I'm going to defer to Katie. Thank you.
Those are all related, and I hope I get your question right. Those are all related bias and limitation we have. Those events happen at the person level rather than the household level. So we've had issues historically in the system with being able to take the eligibility action we need to at the individual level. That's though the workaround that our teams came up with in 2022. We found a way that we'll be able to do that, work around the system limitation, and still take the action we need to for the individuals who don't clear their coverage inconsistency or their inconsistency for being American Indian, Alaska Native, or the Social Security number issue. Does that answer your question, Dr. Hayes?
So I understand the minimum essential coverage, and I understand unverified Social Security numbers. I'm trying to understand the American Indian, Alaska Native. We don't have data. Is that the issue?
We don't actually have data, a good data source to check for individuals who are members of federally recognized American Indian or Alaska Native tribes. So those individuals do need to provide documentation to us that they are members of those tribes, and then we need to work to clear that information. So that's the situation that community needs to do to then get access to the enhanced benefits that they're eligible for.
Got it. Okay, helpful. Okay, thank you. Back to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Dr. Hernandez. And the final recommendation was regarding notices that were not provided. I think what we've stated here is we reviewed with program the corrective action, and they've stated it's completed, it's targeted for Q1 2023. We also noted by working with them that they were in the process of resuming this employer notices, but then they found a system issue, data issue, and they needed to make sure that they were able to get all of the fixes in place, which is why it's moved to Q1 2023, which means there's due diligence in the process from an auditor's perspective.
So this is a manual cleanup. How big a lift is that?
Sydney, do you want me to go ahead?
Yes, please.
It's quite a big lift. We ask our enrollees if they have employers to provide those employer addresses. And there's considerable variation in the data they provide and whether the addresses are accurate. So that is the lift, is trying to clean up addresses, find the right addresses on behalf of the consumers, consolidate where we see enrollees, multiple employers, or a single employer for multiple enrollees, and trying to provide that employer one consolidated list. So very manual effort. We know from our colleagues across the states, it's sort of similar everywhere. So we will do that work to get the notice out in the cases where we can find addresses. This is one, though, outside of the audit where we're trying to work with state partners and find other ways to make this easier for the consumers so that we can help them have that accurate address on the way in, so that we can comply more quickly and make sure that both the employer and the employee has the information that they need.
So it sounds to me, Katie, like not a great opportunity for automation here.
Not one that we've found. It's one that we know the federal marketplace has struggled with. We've seen requirements eased up over the years. There is just not a great source of real-time information about people with minimum essential coverage. So I think we're all sort of struggling to make that process as burdenless as possible.
Okay, helpful, thank you.
And I think to add to that, Dr. Hernandez, I think when the auditors were looking at it, it's ensuring that we have the correct data so they receive the notice, the correct notice.
Yeah. They want the notice. I got it. Okay, Jenny.
Thank you. Moving on to finding number 2. For finding number 2, this is regarding ensuring that we have continued improvements. They've highlighted the continued improvements to ensure full compliance with notice and enrollment termination requirements. So just wanted to point out that SEC had sampled notices to consumers. So there were several system issues that were impacting the notice delivery. They also noted there were system defects and system issues that impacted accuracy and reliability of the information. And for item 3, there were 15 cases sampled, of which 2 required federal tax forms and issued timely and accurately. And then the 4th item, where they had the sample of 15 cases, there was one exception that did not comply with federal regulations and covered California guidance. So just wanted to point out about the risk. This would create a risk that consumers receive coverage and our benefits. Although the consumer is no longer eligible, it also is a non-compliance issue for us. But pointing out that when this was reported by the auditors, the programs had worked on the different recommendations. There are 4 recommendations for finding 2, of which all of the recommendations are now reported in the report as completed. And we have as 2.3 a current process in terms of a current reconciliation. Dr. Hernandez and Ms. Kate Kendall, just to ask a question, the way the format would go is I would go through each recommendation for fully implemented, and actually we would have the recommendation and a summary of the corrective action. So what we're providing here to you is not only is it a summary of the corrective action response, but what has been done so far. And when we say at the top for 2.3 current process, that we do have a process in place for reconciliation. So may I please ask, and I think for managing the time, would you like for me to go through each of these items if they're fully implemented or move into?
I think the ones that are fully implemented are pretty straightforward. Kate, if you have questions or you want any elaboration, otherwise I suggest we keep moving. Kate, you good with that?
I completely agree.
Okay, let's keep going, Jenny, because we've got a lot to cover.
Okay. Item 3, finding number 3. This is the year that there was a request to review the Ombuds office. Just wanted to highlight that Ombuds is one of our new divisions. They actually offer objective, unbiased assistance for our consumers. But we also wanted to highlight that while the auditors state that they generally aligned with industry standards, there were some improvements. However, the findings listed here were not of general risk or of risk-averse areas. In fact, they've noted it as lower risk because they see that everything was working well. In terms of what is fully implemented, the auditors had suggested and recommended that the Ombuds office assess whether they should be fully compliant with the standards, which are the international standards. But after Covered California conducted the analysis and fully implemented that corrective action, it was then decided that based on the hybrid nature of Covered California, then it would be better for us to basically keep our own policies, and it would not be any beneficial to stay with the standards. Do you have any questions on this, Dr. Hernandez? Likewise, for other issues and recommendations.
Who asked us to look at the Ombuds office? I'm just curious.
Excuse me, I did not hear your question. Can you repeat it, please?
The audit of the Ombudsman office, was that requested by somebody in particular?
No, this was when it was not a specific request, but the way that we do our risk assessment when we work on with the auditors, this is from a risk perspective of being a brand new division and a new function, then it was ranked in that risk, but it was not a specific request of a person.
Okay, and it was deemed low risk.
It was deemed low risk, and it was actually cited in the report as lower risk based on, and they've also highlighted that they have noted notable accomplishments of the Ombuds office.
Great. Okay, Kate, any questions on that audit finding?
No, and I really appreciate that explanation. I was wondering that as well.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to
Finding 4.
Navigate. Yeah.
Finding 4 is on the Navigator program. And I think follow up to your question, in a prior audit many years ago, there was an audit of the Navigator program. But here we show, based on the audit work, that the auditors have found that they have strong controls, strong oversight, practices and controls in place to ensure compliance in general provisions. And for any of, they had one recommendation to implement a new payment provision for accuracy, and that was fully implemented. And that was just one item in a contract, and that was immediately cleared. Finding number 5, which is the last item. Finding number 5 refers to opportunities to improve management and reporting of privacy and security practices. As noted, if I'm trying to note our March 2022, I think what we've done as a practice here at Covered California is as soon as our auditors notify us, I think programs work, and we work immediately to make sure there is immediate remediation. Thus, it's fully implemented. I
Great.
think wanted to highlight and I mentioned this earlier, what our corrective action monitoring and assurance not only is work done by the external auditors every year in February, but we have a team in the Office of Audit Services that also performs corrective action assurance. And I think that's different from monitoring because we're actually assuring and working with programs. So that actually takes me to the end of the 2021 audit results. And I would like to take any questions.
Jenny, you mentioned that our auditors are in the room. Is that correct?
Not the external auditors.
No. Okay.
No.
All right. All right. Okay. I assume you need a motion to approve of the audit, the programmatic audit and its findings. Yes.
No, this was a discussion item only, Dr. Hernandez.
Great. Great. Kate, any questions or comments from you before we move on?
I do not. I really appreciate how thorough this was. Thank you.
Great. Do we need public comment on this, Kathy?
Yes.
Yes, we should, Dr. Hernandez.
Okay. I'll open the phone lines. Should anybody have a public comment, we'd be happy to entertain it.
No.
Information's on the screen.
No comments.
Okay. Let's keep going. Jenny?
So I wanted to call in for the next agenda item, the Section Chief of the Office of Audit Services, Mr. Dan Washburn. And we will go through this, and I think we can make it till the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Welcome, Dan. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks, Jenny.
Morning, Dan.
Good morning, Dr. Hernandez, Ms. Kendall. So I want to go over the financial statement audit. And similar to the programmatic audit, this is a federally mandated audit that has to happen every year. And the state exchange must engage in an independent qualified auditing entity to perform an annual independent external financial audit. And so for the last few years, we've used Lance, Sol, and Lungard, or LSL. And the scope of the audit is to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. Reasonable assurance is not absolute assurance, according to GAAP. And issue an auditor's report that includes the opinion of the external auditors. So the high-level summary of results is that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of Covered California. They did not identify any significant unusual transactions, any misstatements, or any deficiencies in internal control. They also disclosed no instances of non-compliance or other matters that are required to be reported under government auditing standards. The actual financial results were shared with the Finance Committee, and Jim Watkins with FMD did that. So that is the high-level results of those. So great news, no findings. Any questions on?
Always great news when there's no findings on our financial statement audits. I just wonder
Absolutely.
what kind of conversation you had with the auditors with regard to if there were to be fraud, where it might occur. as a sort of risk mitigation conversation. Did you have that conversation with our auditors, LSL?
So most of the financial statement audit is handled through our financial management division. I honestly don't know if they had that conversation with them. I know as part of auditing procedures, fraud is always, they don't specifically look for fraud, but it's something that's always at the front of their mind, and if they find anything, they will report it.
Okay. Jenny, you want to add anything?
I think as Dan mentioned, the auditors do not look for fraud. However, I think as he had mentioned, like when the financial management division is asked, the different divisions, and as well as I was asked about areas of fraud or areas that we would be aware of. And I think that would be more of part of their risk assessment process, and that's done annually.
Yeah, I was just noting that the scope of the audit was to make sure there were no misstatements, whether due to fraud or error. And so I always think it's good discipline to ask where fraud might occur with regard to our financial statements, or any place else for that matter. And so as long, Jenny, as you have that conversation, I just think that's important a process step to at least think through where fraud might occur so we can be aware and test it.
And as Dan had mentioned as part, well, the process would have that in place, but then there would also be interviews or even just a questionnaire. And once and I think we will make sure that for the next report out, we will be able to share that if you would like for us to do so.
Yeah, I think that would be good, Jenny. We should do that, I think. Let's try to make time for that on the next one. Okay, do you need a motion on the financial statement audit?
No, we don't need a motion. It's discussion only. There is a public comment, or time for public comment. I don't believe there are any, but.
Kate, let me ask you first, any questions, comments on the financial audit?
I don't have any questions. I do want to underscore what you said, Dr. Hernandez. I do think, even if it's just a short few sentences that states where there could be risk or potential for fraud and what redundancies are built in to assure that doesn't happen, just to foreground that a little bit might just be helpful for us and for the public to have that confidence.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kate. And maybe, Jessica, I would ask that you, when you meet with the auditors, which I assume you do, that you too have this conversation with regard to fraud risk.
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay, let's open up the lines. If there's anybody in the room or on the line that would like to make comments on the financial audits, we'll take a moment to hear those.
There are no comments.
Okay, just want to congratulate the team. Financial audits, all these audits take a lot of work, and so thank you to everybody who gave us a clean financial audit. One should never take that for granted. So thank you to the whole team for that. Okay, Jenny, we've got about 10 minutes left. How about DSS's audit?
All right, Department of Social Services audit results. So we entered into just a little background on this one. Covered California and CDSS entered into an interagency agreement that authorizes CDSS to conduct hearings based on consumer appeals that arise out of the application. This is something that's in government code, so Covered California is required actually to enter into a contract with social services to handle appeals. Our objectives in this were to provide reasonable assurance of the accuracy and timeliness of appeals invoices and compliance with interagency agreements, terms, and conditions. And this covered appeals invoices issued between July 1st, 2019 and June 30th, 2021. So our key findings were that the reports used in preparation of invoices lacked accuracy and timeliness, and primarily this came from the fact that it was inconsistent on which month. Sometimes the month that they were issuing invoices in used reports from the prior month. The second one was CDSS applied unclear accounting records to invoice covered California. This was primarily from when they made adjustments to prior months, they did not provide support detailed enough to understand those adjustments. They had weaknesses in their computer systems, was the third one. This came from the fact that they could not provide all reports needed for an audit trail. Specifically their case management system could only produce reports for a point in time. They could not go back and show us the historical reports to support some of the invoices. So in general, CDSS management agreed with our audit findings, and they've already begun to improve their processes for appeals invoices, and they're working on creating reports that have all data elements to substantiate the invoices. They're working on updating the case management system, and also working on developing specific reports in Fiscal to help support those invoices. So our next steps for that one is to ensure accountability. We will follow up with CDSS on their process improvements and ensure that the internal controls are strengthened and that they've taken appropriate corrective action to fix the support for these invoices. Any questions on the CDSS report?
When do they anticipate they'll have remedies on these findings on the audit?
So they when we finished this audit report, they were in the process of making those changes. They did not provide a specific time frame, which is why we will follow up. We typically follow up about every 6 months to see where they are with it. We've also been working with Service Center, which is the manager for this contract with CDSS, to make sure that they are getting what they need as well to monitor these invoices.
So I'm curious, on the background, you said that the Department of Social Services essentially adjudicate about 4,000 appeals. From a trending point of view, is that typical? Is that high? Is it low? What does that look like year over year? Is that 4,000 appeals against the enrollment that we have? What do we think about those numbers?
So that 4,000 is about a pretty good average, except that when the pandemic hit, the appeals dropped off quite a bit, actually, because the suspension of a lot of the eligibility and enrollment rules for the public health emergency. So I believe, I don't have the numbers in front of me, I believe it dropped off to about half during that time. But as the public health emergency ends, they kind of expect those appeals cases to go back up towards the 4,000.
So this 4,000 number is sort of pre-pandemic baseline, is that fair?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Kate, any questions or comments on this one?
No, seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I would just encourage us, I know DSS is working on this diligently, but I would encourage us as we go back in and check that if it's not yet remediated, we get some time frame for which we think it will be.
Yes.
With all the other audits, I think it's always helpful to have a flag in the ground of when we're hoping to remedy it. And then if they miss it, we can certainly understand why, but I think it would be helpful to do that.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Let's open this up for public comment. If anybody would like to comment on this particular interagency agreement audit, we'll take that comment now.
No comments.
Great. Okay, and again, that does not need a motion, I don't believe, right?
No.
Okay.
Did you?
Back to you, Jenny.
Yes. So just wanted to check on time, Dr. Hernandez and Ms. Kendall. We have the Office of Audit Services quarterly report, which by internal audit standards, we will be providing on a quarterly basis. So we can probably table this for the next meeting, then we can go into the next steps so we know what's in front of us. We also have listed the questions, and if you have other questions, we would take that. Is that okay with you in terms of next steps?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. We'll table this. Let's talk briefly about next steps, and then we'll hit our 10 o'clock stop time.
Thank Thank you so much. So for the next steps, as we had mentioned, the quarterly, the audit committee meets at least quarterly. For February 2023, we will have a detailed discussion of the state exchange improper payment measurement. And this is the new federal mandate, and we are working with CMS, and we actually had engaged in the longer pilot process to ensure that we can understand what the review criteria, working with the different programs. We have a dedicated project team, and the expected implementation of this SEIPM is in 2024. The team is currently working on finishing a program design, reviewing review criteria, but in February we can give you a detailed and in-depth look and also provide what are the next steps and what it looks like in terms of working with our stakeholders. We are also going to look at and review the organizational independence of the Office of Audit Services based on standards and based on what the state control agencies require. And at this point, we'll be providing the report on the quarterly report of audit activities. So every quarter, we do the same report. In June 2023, we are going to request your approval of the proposed 2023 audit plan. This is the risk-based audit plan. And we also will provide, as a roll-up to the quarterly audit activities, the annual audit report. And I think we're trying to do this on cycle for June 2023 because we just organized and established this independent audit committee. So just wanted to highlight the activities. And of course, if you have other questions and follow-up, and we are here, the Office of Audit Services, and if please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions, and we have taken all the action items.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you to your whole team. I appreciate it. I don't think there's anything else on next steps, Kate, unless you have something you'd like to calendar for February or June.
I do not. Appreciate that.
Okay. Then with that, thank you to the whole team. I hope everybody has a very nice Thanksgiving. Stay safe. And again, Jenny, thank you to your entire team. Appreciate it. Have a
Yes.
good one. Bye-bye.
Happy Thanksgiving to you both.
Happy Thanksgiving. Shout out to the team. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all.
Bye.